Hi, my name is Sierra Lake, and this is my teacher work sample from EDU 352. I did my 14-day field placement here in Hamilton, Montana. The contextual factors for the community that I chose are focused on income and education. The first one is the median income of Ravalli County is $38,366. This is compared to a U.S. median of $53,482. This number is considered for a two-income household. With a lower medium household income, parents could be working a second job, which means they're not home as much. Students might be hungry if their household is lacking food, and they might be lacking help with their schoolwork. The second factor is the statistics for Ravalli County are a high school graduate or some college age 25 and up is 91%. So 91% of the people in Ravalli County are a high school graduate. People with a bachelor's degree or higher only make up 25.5% of Ravalli County. The implication for this is parents with little education might be working jobs with shift differentials. Such as myself right now, I work a job at the hospital. I make an extra $3 just for working in the evening, but it means that I give up that time being home with my daughter and my husband. I can vouch for this. I'm definitely homeless with my child right now. She's only 1.5, so it doesn't really bother her. But a good thing to make up for that would be having a set time in your classroom for students to stay after school to get help with homework. The contextual factors for the school are, starting with the school status, the school is a designated Title I school. The implication for this is positive. The school receives additional state funding for extra services, and they have more teachers prepared and on staff to be able to work one-on-one with more needy students. So this is actually a benefit for the students. The second factor is focused on race. 86% of the students at Daly are white, 12 are Hispanic and Latino, 2% are Asian, African American, and Native Hawaiian. The implication for this is to consider exposing students to different topics about different cultures. Since a vast majority of the race is 86% white, it would be good to expose students to different cultures. The third factor is the physical features of the school itself. The 3 second grade classrooms are attached in a V shape. Our classroom is smack dab in the middle of that V. The implication of this is the students try to leave the class quite frequently to go through the other classrooms to visit their friends. This is really disruptive for our class and the class that they are passing through. So we try to limit the times that students can exit the classroom. The contextual factors for the class are there are 3 students scoring high on math assessments. We have 3 boys in our class that score really high on all of their math. So the implication for this is we plan for higher level instruction during our math rotations. So when these 3 boys go back to work with the lead teacher, she focuses on higher level problems or math problems with higher numbers than the rest of the class is working on to challenge them more. The second factor is there are 10 boys and 9 girls. We have a pretty large class and it's a very small classroom itself, so it gets a little chaotic. We do frequent brain breaks to help with this. An example of one is Alive, Awake, Enthusiastic. This is from our school's website that we are a part of. It's Go Noodle. There's a lot of activities and stuff to get kids moving and stuff on there. We use this one from there quite frequently. It just gets the kids moving and gets some energy out. The contextual factors for the classroom are, to begin, the students' desks are arranged in groups of 4 throughout the classroom. They each have a colored sticker on their desk. That same sticker stays on their desk for the entire year, and there are 4 different colors within each group. The teacher uses these stickers to assign tasks to different group members instead of having the conflict of students trying to decide who's going to do what. The implication of this is it gives students a role in their group, and it allows the teacher to assign tasks easily without pre-planning the roles. The second factor is there's a computer center set up with 4 laptops. This implication for this is it gives students the opportunity to be exposed to technology, but not at their own free will. When they're given permission, they can use them, and it promotes sharing and collaborative work among students because there's only 4 and we have 19 students. The contextual factors for the teacher and the evidence-based practices and higher level practices that she uses are starting with cognitive relaxation coping skills. The teacher has a private area in the back of the classroom with materials set up such as Play-Doh, crayons, yarn, and beads. When a student is acting out or not listening or has been redirected multiple times and still isn't following directions, the teacher will refer the student to this area, and she calls it a calm down area. The student uses the positive relaxation techniques in the center to kind of relax their emotions, and when they're ready, they can come back and join the class. The second is a reward based on a specific performance standard. The teacher has magnets in the corner for whiteboard and a small table drawn. One side of it is the teacher's side, the others is the student. If the students have more magnets at the end of the week, they get to choose a privilege from a list. An example of that is they are having a Valentine's Day party in the next couple of weeks, and if they get more magnets than the teacher, they will be allowed to have a stuffed animal Valentine's Day party. If the teacher gets more magnets, they don't get this reward. It's kind of just a little bit more of an incentive to want to follow directions. The third one is individualized instruction. The teacher plans the groups for particular content areas such as math and reading based on the student's abilities and content knowledge. So during math, we do math rotations, and we have 4 separate groups that rotate around the classroom based on their abilities. So they're with kids of the same ability. The same thing we do for reading, but we actually do that between 3 classes, not just our classroom. The fourth one is implementing organizational routines. The teacher sticks to the same routine and schedule pretty much every day as best as she can, and this just kind of leads to a better flow in the classroom. There's less chaos and disruption. The students know what to expect next. These are the implications for the contextual factors for the teacher. The first one is for the cognitive relaxation coping skills. So for the calm down area, having this area separate from the rest of the class, it just kind of allows for independent relaxation, and it kind of just allows time for the student to calm down and think about their actions, while the rest of the class can stay focused on what they're doing. The second one is for the rewards based on a specific performance standard. This reward system pushes the students to want to earn the privilege for the week. It leads to less problems in the class and less problem behaviors. One thing we've noticed with this system is that kids that have frequent problem behaviors are showing them less now that they have this reward system and they have something to look forward to. The third one, individualized instruction, it just allows for students to learn the same content area as the rest of the class, but it challenges them enough to let them continue growing and learning. So if there's a proficient group, they can still be learning what the class is learning, but they can be learning at a little bit of a higher level, so they're still being pushed to learn and grow. And the same as goes for if there was a lower level group. If they were learning at a lower level than the rest of the class, the teacher could slow down and teach them at the level they need. The fourth one is implementing organizational routines. This just allows for less interruptions from students. They just know what to expect next, usually if the day sticks to the same routine. The teacher also has a visual schedule for them to see. And throughout the day, she moves things as they do a topic or a subject, she moves it to the other side to show that it's been done and what will be coming next. So now that we've talked about the class that I was with and the teacher that I had learned from, we will talk about the unit that I did for my teacher work sample. The unit description is, in this unit, students will use addition and subtraction with regrouping using a variety of different ways to do so. The unit goal was, given proper instruction and practice time, students will demonstrate an understanding of adding and subtracting with regrouping, with at least an 80% accuracy on a final assessment, as measured by the teacher's answer key. So for this unit, I used the Common Core standards that the teacher actually provided me with that she uses. They're called the ICANN Common Core standards. So for the unit, the standards that I used are, I can use strategies to solve addition word problems. I can use strategies to solve subtraction word problems. I can understand and use hundreds, tens, and ones. I can add and subtract with regrouping. I can explain why I need to use addition and subtraction to help me solve problems. And I can count money to help me solve word problems. So this is the framework that I used for my 5 lessons. To begin, we would do a whole group mini lesson. This usually lasted about 10 minutes or so. I would do an intro to the lesson. I would then model examples of the problems for the students. I would have the students give me examples they wanted to see, and then I would assign the worksheet from the math workbooks. After the mini lesson, we would then go to our math rotation groups. This would last about 25 minutes. The class would then split into 3 groups. The first group would be working on the worksheets with the student teacher, me. A quick check would be done with the worksheets during this rotation. So as soon as they were done, I would check it, put a star on the top. If their worksheet wasn't completed and didn't have a star on the top, they had to stay inside for the first part of recess to finish. The second group was working back at the table with the lead teacher, and the third group plays math games or flashcards. For the end of the lesson, for the wrap-up, it takes about 5 minutes. If the quick check wasn't done during rotations, it's done at this time, and we clean up, and if there are any questions, they are asked at this time. So these are the 5 descriptions for the lesson plans that I did for the unit. Lesson plan number 1 was, students will practice adding and subtracting numbers 100 or less on a worksheet from their workbooks. There are 12 problems on the worksheet. So for lesson plan number 1, for the differentiation, we focused on doing, for the proficient group of our 3 boys, we did problems that were over 100, so just focus on numbers more than 100. Both on the top and on the bottom. For the lower scoring group we have of students, we focused on numbers more in the teens. And then for the middle scoring group, we focused more on just giving them the worksheet from the workbook. For lesson plan number 2, students will be given play money and asked to open their workbooks to page 198. Students will be asked to read the amount of each fruit and represent the amount of money with their play money on the worksheet. So during that time, the teacher would walk around and put a star on each problem as they see it successfully represented with the play money. So there would be a piece of fruit on the worksheet and an amount below it, so say 75 cents. And the students would have to show us with their play money how to give somebody 75 cents. Again, same as the first lesson, for the differentiation, there was lower amounts for the lower scoring group, and then for the proficient group we focused on higher amounts, which were usually more like dollars and cents for the lower groups. So for lesson plan number 3, students will practice solving unknown add-ins by setting up math equations with word problems. So students will watch the teacher model a variety of problems, and then they will practice as a class. Students will then have the opportunity to work on their own. So during this time, the students had to set up their own math problems from reading a word problem. The big factor with this is students need to show their work and show how they got their answer. The differentiation for that, again, was just having higher numbers for the more proficient students in our class and lower numbers for the lower scoring students. Lesson plan number 4, students will practice solving complex word problems by setting up math mountains. So if we don't know what a math mountain is, there's a number on the top, and the 2 numbers on the bottom are how the students get to the number on the top. So students set up the math mountain with the answer on the top, one addend on the bottom, and they have to find the second one. So students will watch the teacher model a variety of problems, and then they'll practice as a class, and then again they'll have the time to do them on their own. Same thing with the differentiation as the last 3 lessons. Lesson plan number 5, students will practice comparing word problems in this lesson. To begin the lesson, students will make sense of problems and how they are modeled or laid out. So this lesson was focusing on the layout of a problem. So if students had an answer, they could understand that the answer could be placed far to the left or far to the right, and it's still the same problem. So they just learned the layout or the structure of equations, and that they still mean the same thing if they're laid out differently. So those are my 5 lessons that I focused on, and the differentiation that I used for them. The differentiation was pretty much the same for all of them, usually just focusing on higher numbers for the more proficient group, and lower numbers, more simple problems for the lower scoring group. This is the pre-assessment and the post-assessment that I used for my teacher work sample unit. I used the same assessment for both to measure the students' gains. This assessment sort of covers all of the things I talked about in my 5 lessons. It talks about money, it talks about the setup of equations, and they're all addition and subtraction. There are some numbers over 100 and some numbers under 100. So all 5 of my lessons prepared my students to take this assessment. This is a picture of one of the daily assessment tools we use. This is just one of the worksheets that we did during one of my lessons. This lesson was the one we did on word problems. So this just shows on the right, it shows the students' work and how they got their answer. And it also gives an idea of the students being able to understand that we can lay out math problems differently and still get the same answer. The top 2 problems are laid out top to bottom, and the bottom 2 are laid out from left to right. So that was one of our lessons focusing on the structure of equations and how they can still equal the same thing. This is my graph comparing my pre and post assessment scores. In the blue is the pre-assessment scores, and the scores were out of 5, 1 point for each problem. There were 5 problems on the assessment. The green is for the post-assessment. In the areas where you see a 0, where there should be blue, where the score was 0 on those assessments. So you can see the comparison that the students had. A lot of them were scoring 0 or 1 on the pre-assessment in the blue, and by the end most were close to 4 or 5 on the post-assessment in the green. So even without knowing yet the percentages of the gains, you can see the gain. After reviewing the chart, I have the actual numbers, the gains, to talk about. So the overall mean of the group for their gain score was 52%. So overall, the entire class, they gained 52% on their assessment. So from the pre-assessment to the post-assessment, that's really good. The proficient group, it didn't apply to them to have a gain because they started out at 100 and they ended with 100. The middle group, the instructional subgroup, their gain was 30%, and the pre-instructional, so our lower scoring group of students, their gain was 36%. So the lower group of students, most of them only got a 0 or a 1 on the pre-assessment, and by the time they took the post-assessment, they were getting almost a 5, if not a 5. So the gains are obvious, and in the teacher work sample, it asks if the gain was more than 20%, and for each of my groups and the class as an overall, the gain was a lot more than 20%. This is just an example of the pre-assessment and the post-assessment. These are from the same student. On the pre-assessment, on day 1, he got a 0 out of 5. And you can see he didn't show any work. It looks like he copied some answers from maybe a neighbor because he has close to the right answers, but not showing very much work. On the post-assessment, you can see where he showed all of his work. This is the big thing in our class, as our groups allow students to be a lot closer and a lot more opportunity to copy answers. So showing their work is really important. You can see on all of his problems where he circled where he had to go more on the floor and go next door and borrow 10 more. So that's our big thing, again, like I said, is focusing on showing your work. And so you can see the improvement in just the 14 days that I was in this class and taught my lessons. This pre versus post assessment was proof of the success of my unit. So the most effective practices that I used during my unit were sticking to an organizational routine. Sticking to a routine just allowed for a lot less disruption in the class, and it just allowed my students to know what was coming next each day. Our lessons kind of flowed in the same order and the same time frames. This just let them know what we'd be doing every day, and it flowed really well. The next one was setting up small group work. Having 2 teachers in the room at one time made it really successful to do small group work, because there was one of us with at least 2 of the groups. The third group kind of did their own thing and got more distracted, but it was nice to have small groups set up with a teacher, and so students could also collaboratively work with their peers. The third one is building respectful relationships. This is a big one because being a stranger coming into this classroom and only having 14 days to have an impact on these kids is really hard, and to build relationships with them in 14 days is also really hard. I think I did a great job at building relationships and building respectful relationships. Students and I kind of were able to build relationships where they knew when it was their turn to talk and they knew when it was my turn to talk. There wasn't many times for correction, and I thought that went really well throughout my lessons. The fourth one is reinforcing productive and positive behavior. This is a big one because there's quite a few problem behaviors in our class. So this is something I've learned through my classes at Western, is to not punish and to not point out the problem behaviors, but rather reinforce when there are productive and positive behaviors. So saying more things like, I like how you're doing that, I like how you're staying on task, etc. So those kind of things just help the structure of the class flow and help the student to know that you're noticing that they're trying. The last one is coordinating and adjusting instruction. This kind of flows into the most effective and the least effective. It was a good strategy, but I don't think that I was prepared to do it to the extent that I needed to. There were many times where the instruction needed to be changed or adjusted because of the learning abilities of the students in our class. Like I said, there were times where I didn't feel like I was prepared to alter what I was teaching to make it understandable for all of the students in my class. It is a great strategy, and I hope in the future to be able to be more prepared for that. So down to the least effective. This is kind of one I have mixed emotions about, individualized instruction. I love the idea of this strategy, but it is very hard to individualize instruction for 19 kids in a class with 2 teachers, which would usually just be 1 teacher. Like I said, I like the idea of individualizing the instruction and being able to focus one-on-one what each student needs and where they need to grow, but this is very hard to achieve with having only 1 teacher. So those are the practices that I used and what I felt was effective and what was not. So these are the future actions for professional development for myself. The biggest one, I think, is to have a better understanding of the content that I'm teaching. Going into this, I have not looked at math in a very long time, and I was sort of overwhelmed in the beginning and kind of scared to teach a math unit. I think I did a good job, and I feel more comfortable now if I were to do it again. But going into it, not having done it in so long, I was kind of nervous. But having a better understanding of the content would allow me to deliver the content and teach the children that I'm working with better. The next one is the form of delivery of the content. So this is my first opportunity I've had in an older classroom. All of my previous lab times and things have been in a preschool setting. So that's a lot different than a second grade environment. So the form of delivery was very different for me to have an older group of kids compared to preschoolers. So that's something that I think I really need to grow in, is to be able to have more opportunity to teach in older classrooms. The third one is strategies to manage individualized instruction. So this is something I think I need to grow in, is to be able to observe other teachers teaching and talk to them about how they focus on individualized instruction. Which brings me to my last one, is observing veteran teachers. This is a big thing for me for the future that I'm excited about for my student teaching, is to be able to observe a teacher who's taught for a while and can really teach me what they've learned over the years. I'm really excited for the opportunity to be able to student teach, and I'm hoping I can get placed with the same teacher I was with for my 14 days, because I really feel like I had a lot of personal and professional growth during this time. So that is the end of my presentation for my teacher work sample unit. I really feel like I had the opportunity to grow and develop personally and professionally during this semester and this field placement. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to be able to student teach in the fall. So thank you for taking the time to view my presentation.